Peace and love, royal family. We're going to discuss European mythology. And I wanted to talk first about good and bad, because the way we look at the world is, we try to justify our judgments of good, bad, evil, or, what I'm saying, good, whatever you want to look at it. The thing to it is, you know, I'm a strong believer in the teachings of, the ancient ones. And they didn't see life as no good or bad. They just saw life as a gray area more. It's a combination of good and bad. They both needed each other like night and day. And the thing to it is that we don't understand is if there was no such thing as good, there wouldn't be no bad either. Just like if there wasn't no bad, there wouldn't be no good. You need one to measure the other, or it'll just be. So on that note now, when we look at good and bad, we're being judgmental. We're judging things. And you're here to experience, not really to change or to judge. This doesn't justify human action as far as, right from wrong and being a criminal and breaking the law. Law is law, and everybody know right from wrong. It's really built into your system, your magnetic field, and to perverse your magnetic field, you will know right from wrong because your magnetic field will work against you. You'll know it. So there's a difference in good and bad, and then there is the moral one that we was taught by, other people. I would say the European colonizer version of good and bad. That good and bad is what we're discussing really, because it got a long history to it that goes back to African spirituality, when our ancestors ran the land and they had their little tribes, the Bushmen and the Pygmies. And they had their little rituals where they did it in reference to the harvest, the four seasons, like spring. They'll pray for the growth of harvest and crops. Summertime, it's the hottest and most humidest, so that's when they're reaping the bounties. So they pray to another god for that. And as winter is coming around, they pray to another god for the fall season. And winter was the worst, and with winter you equate that with the same as nighttime, because back then you had as much day animals and night animals too that was nocturnal. And these nocturnal animals will come out and the ancestors will have to seek refuge, because most nocturnal animals, are flesh eaters, And so the night got associated with bad and the day got associated with good. Just like the seasons, winter was really bad and summer and spring and all that was good. Fall was kind of bad. So we get our morals from not just the seasons and night and day, but also from our health. Our health is determined by the magnetic field. If we perverse the magnetic field of ourselves, it doesn't have to be a physical health it start off with. It start off as a mental health. You get what's called hell within yourself, duality. And from this duality, then, you start having conflict in your magnetic field. You're out of sequence or frequency. And so now your endocrinology system start producing chemicals, extra chemicals that goes to your organs, and that's how diseases start. It's a disharmony of your magnetic field. So that's really what we determine bad from and good from. If you stay in harmony with your magnetic field and don't pervert it, don't go around being obnoxious or ignorant towards others, with attitudes or just using force against somebody, that will keep your magnetic field integrity good. That's where we get our morals from, and we strive for better quality and morals. But we still not discussing good and bad, but I'm giving you a history so you understand. When I talk about good and bad, it doesn't have anything to do with your righteousness, your spirituality, or how you're supposed to act within accordance of a human being. Good and bad I'm talking about is how we let people dictate what they think is morally correct and what is not morally correct. And this takes us back to our African spirituality. Like I said, our ancestors prayed to these different gods and different spirits. Now the thing is, when the Europeans came around, they could not see these spirits, and they did not see the actual ritual worship, the significance of it. So what they started doing was they first said that we Africans are like savages, beast-like. We pray to half animal, half human entities or beings or whatever emblems or relics they were seeing. And so upon that, they started calling us a lower class people, and that we was not capable of running ourselves, much less governing our society or the world. And so you see that in that came a skimmage. The skimmage was now they did not see the spirituality, so they wanted to either destroy it or get to understand it more. Later on, this now I'm talking about is the early years when you're looking back into the history prior to Europeans even being created. This is before 8,000 years ago, and you know science got it now. Europeans was not around prior to 8,000 years ago. Their DNA just came up. This is by NASA and Discovery Channel. All these people producing this now. So prior to 8,000 years ago, I'm talking about, you know, these people that roamed the earth, they had God, gods. We brought religion here. They did not know about this stuff. So when they tried to investigate into it and couldn't understand the spiritual part because they couldn't see these higher beings, their resonance was of a low resonance because they was fresh, new into this earth, and they didn't acquire consciousness yet. And so it was a skimmage now, because when we started coming in to act with these people, you got what's called, they took over society. They started barbarianism by conquering different tribes in different parts of the world, Africa and so forth. And this brought about a bad spirit. This made the Africans started doing voodoo and obeah and all types of different magic now as a revenge or to get back at these people. And so once this started happening, the Europeans started now realizing that this is a threat to them, because some of the peoples was so good at their magic and voodoo and witchcraft, they was actually making people befriend the kings and queens and taking their money, falling in love with them, doing love spells onto the queen and king, and then passing them on the street, and next thing you know, they in love with them and they take all their stuff. So it got out of hand, and the governments and all the people got together and decided to get rid of all the spirituality, all the temples, everything. Everything got destroyed throughout the Inquisition. But now prior to them already, you got Socrates and all these great Greek philosophers was going down to Egypt, acquiring the philosophy, the mathematics, the science, and everything in order to establish the Greek society. You know, this is the time when we had libraries in all the temples. Greece didn't even have a library yet. Even when they made the Library of Alexandria, you know, a lot of people believe that that's Greek, but Greek still didn't have at the time when they invented the Library of Alexandria a library of their own, you know, so it didn't have no Greek influence. That's all Egyptian. But a lot of people got the story misconstrued. So you have to go do your history, and you will realize even after the building of the Library of Alexandria, Greeks never had a library up to then, so they didn't have the thoughts, much less the mental ability to create libraries. It was an Egyptian thing. And once they had established these libraries, and then they went and established the mystery school, that's learning these secret sciences or the science of nature. And the reason why it was so kept a secret, because all of Egypt practiced it. But the way they did it is, you know, you're born like a lower animal self first. Not saying you're an animal, but your nature is that of the lower beings, from the plants and the angels and the demons or seraphims, whatever you want to call it. These was the underworld beings, the shadow beings that was first created. And from them, that's where we get our soul. So they call it the animal soul. You can look it up through Mesmer or whatever. You know, it's a lot of people, Paracelsus, who speak on the animal man. So once you realize you have to first ascend, and this don't happen till you're about 29, 30, maybe up to 33. That's where you get your story of Jesus. He just pops up out of nowhere at 33 because he was no more animal man. He was in his higher self. But this is also the story of how you come into age at the Egyptian initiation. All the Egyptians, when they reached that 30 years old, they had to go through what's called the coming into day, where they go from the darkness, the shadow being, to the light, where they become a higher being, resonating into their higher self. So you had to take the initiation once you hit 30, but prior to 30, it was a mystery to everybody and didn't know. And, you know, after the Greeks and the Romans got a hold of it, they kept it a secret and made up these mystery schools and made it so that you have to at least do 6 years of adaptship or apprenticeship before you could get into even the school or to even be worthy to read the books. And these is ancient Chaldean Babylon books. That's just a story of elementals, these entities that was here first. You know, they formed earth, air, water, fire, spirits, and how they created man from, you know, them intermating with each other. And later on, you know, they intermated again and started different color races. This is what's in the books, and we don't know about it. But everything is not about really, you know, God in the sense of how we look at it. It's more about different entities. There is the highest force, which is the God, which we call the ether energy. You know, just like the earth energy is the negative, and you would say the ether energy is the positive. Together they make one electricity. They work together, which is us, the antenna that's grounded to the earth, and we are able to connect to all these energies and different entities through our pineal gland, which is like the throne. You know, that's why God is always on the throne, and that gives us consciousness, and we express ourselves from many, many personalities that we have through these different beings, and that's how we learn our knowledge. So anyways, the point now, like I was getting back to, being that they destroyed the temples and everything was gone, we wind up now lost our spirituality. And especially when slavery took place and they started importing all the Africans from the West Africa, because they first was going to these Caribbean islands and the islands first. And in there you could read the stories about how, you know, slavery there, the slaves was not trying to listen to these people. So they made sure they try to either disobey, they run away, or the worst thing that it was doing was committing suicide. It was more slaves committing suicide than people being hung, you know, and that's the most important part of the spirituality we got to understand, because we was demoralized in the process. You see, what wound up happening is that a lot of the slaves was not going to work for white people, much less, you know, be a slave for them. Neither way, they didn't want to participate in anything with them. So what they did, they started committing suicide. These is the Africans started it when they got with the Taino Indians. You see, the Taino Indians was already up in the mountains of all these islands and United States, defending themselves with the Moors against these Europeans. That's why Christopher Columbus came as reinforcement, or whatever the case may be. But anyways, the ones now started getting with the Taino Indians. They started learning their spirituality because the Africans know theirs and the Taino Indian knows theirs. So the bottom line was they came up with voodoo, obia, and bring up a whole new science, a war science, using spirituality, knowing that if they die, they go back to their homeland, their original homeland, Africa. So a lot of the slaves then started just like now agreeing with their slave master and committing suicide. And so this started fucking up the slave masters because they was losing their stocks. They paid a lot of money for each one of them slaves to have them on the land. So what wound up happening now, they said that one guy, I forgot his name, he told everybody and taught everybody now that to stop the slaves from killing themselves, to cut off their heads and hang it inside the town square. This is to prove to the slave that even if they kill themselves, they're still here on this plantation, not back in Africa. So they used to cut off the heads of the slaves and then put it right in the middle of the square or whatever, and have them all come around and watch and tell them stories about how they got the key to the passage of their soul, and they not granting them passage. They was denied the right of passage upon death, and as long as they disobeyed, that's how it's going to be for them. So it did ease up on the slaves running and rebelling, but now that spread it out throughout all the different islands as a method. So you had a lot of plantations that was really, really disgusting and nasty to look at, because these slave masters was hanging these slaves from trees, and just a lot of them cut off heads and hung them on poles and on the fences. It was all over all the islands. That's how they kept the slaves in check, because the slaves refused to work for them, and they was like, they'd rather kill themselves. They'd rather go home. They knew their signs. So the white people got smart on them and tricked them with technology and told them that they denied them the right of passage. And so by them Africans seeing that they were still here, it scared the ones that didn't kill themselves, because they was like the ones, they was the sellout ones, basically. The real Africans, they all killed themselves. None of them participated in slavery. They got rid of themselves, or they was runaways. They became, the rebels. The ones that stood, was our precursors. They got into the science and Christianity, which was just a way to dumb them down so that they won't use their spirituality just to believe. And they gave them from the gray area now to what's called the black and white, good and bad. That's what this whole topic is about, because God created everything. You understand? And he make you wake up every day. You would say that gladly. Oh, God made me wake up. But you walk and you see somebody get shot. Oh my God, this is evil. This is the devil. Everything happened for a reason. God made you see that for a reason. He make evil for a reason. He make people oppressed for a reason. I'm grown now and I understand a lot of these things. Like, for instance, we chase money and we look at life. We want what the Europeans created, and not realizing back in Africa we wouldn't even participate in this money game scheme. We had our own thing going, and when we lost that, we lost who we are. And so thus we running around chasing something that is not our constitution or what we about. And in doing so, we kill our spirituality. And in doing that, we don't have no intuition. We don't have no willpower. Somebody has harnessed our willpower and is using it against us. And we don't understand that, because we want to be just like them. It's like, you was a slave and you admired your slave master's power. And now he frees you and you want to be like your slave master. And so you go get a car, a home, and you get the snobby attitude and everything that goes along with being a slave master, and lost your true spirituality of what you was created for. Anyways, the bottom line is, being poor is a beautiful thing. Being poor keeps you humble, and it makes you one with everything in nature. Those that have money is very arrogant, and they're ignorant, and they don't understand life, and they don't care about nobody but their own riches. They take upon burdens upon themselves, clogging up their space of freedom, and they don't know what freedom is. Look at it like this. The poor man who has nothing sit around and drink a beer, probably smoke a blunt, and he chill with his wife. The rich man work hard, stacking money, hopefully millions if he's lucky, to do the same thing the poor man is doing. Sit back, relax one day, probably on the island, drinking a beer, smoking a blunt, listening to music. You don't really need the money to do that. It's up here. It's all up here, man. You gotta just figure a way how to survive in this world. And the first thing to do is to free your psychology of what people put in your head. There's only one truth, and there's no such thing as good or bad. Everything is experience. Truth overrides everything. You learn from the bad. That's why you know what good is. But if you take away all the bad, you wouldn't know what good is. You wouldn't be out here learning. So it's our own judgment, and it's best not to judge something if you didn't experience it, because you got the media that's telling us right from wrong, what to do, how to live, what to eat, and we follow it. They make up a new McRib sandwich, you run into McDonald's. You know McDonald's is all chemicals and they're killing you on purpose just so that the pharmaceutical company can make money and you participate in this execution. You know, it's not godly. You could be a Christian and never hurted nobody. You're a sinner. You're killing yourself and you're doing genocide to the other nations by participating in this game they're playing with you. I'm pretty sure they don't eat that food and they don't live like that. They do it to the consumer. But the consumer have to wisen up. You have to wisen up. They're never going to not give you what you're not asking for, supply and demand. So I hope you demand better quality and better questions and stop just giving into whatever they feed us and giving into whatever they tell us. There's no such thing as good as bad. Just observe the world and enjoy it, because a lot of the problems we have, especially the white people, and I'm telling y'all straight up, I have no problem with everything. We all mix. There's no such thing as no black race or no white race. Whites come from blacks. Pygmies was here first in Bushmen, and Europe, everywhere. Y'all is the offsprings. After that, white people done fucked everybody over so much. We are mixed up with them already. Everybody's mixed now. You understand? So nobody is either one. But I'm just saying, y'all attitude, y'all would see in the jungle two giraffe fucking, and then want to put a fence around it and say that's not right. I don't want to see that. Y'all gotta stop regulating what y'all see and stop calling what the shot of how it looks and what's proper and what's not proper, and let the world be free. This is nature. They have storms, hurricanes, bad weathers. You have to take that. You can't stop the storms. You can't stop the hurricanes. You can't stop the earthquake. You gotta let it go too. As much as you have sunny days, you're gonna have bad days. Well, I just wanted to say that. University of Conscious Science. One love.